Hey, Soul Stories fam. We're starting a new love journey. Tell us where you're watching from. Don't forget to subscribe and join our family. Now stay with us. The story begins. The gunshot tore through the night. The sound didn't just pierce the air, it ripped apart the cage of Deanna's stolen youth. She curled beneath the bed, breath ragged, hands trembling as she pressed them over her mouth to keep from crying out. Outside the worn wooden door, heavy footsteps dragged along the floor, reeking of whiskey and rage. "You made me look like a fool in front of Harrison Miller." Her father's voice thundered, rough and shredded by liquor and hatred. Another gunshot cracked through the silence, the bullet tearing into the framed photo on the wall, right through the smiling face of Deanna's late mother. Plaster dust rained onto Deanna's hair. She bit her lip until she tasted blood. Her heart pounded so hard she was certain he could hear it. Her father, the man who once taught her to ride horses, who once carried her when she fell, had become a drunken beast, his eyes red with debt and wounded pride. He had promised to marry her off to Harrison Miller, a powerful, wealthy man nearly 30 years her senior, whose 3 previous wives had all died in accidents. Deanna knew if she agreed, she'd just be another name on that list. The door rattled under his fists. "Open this door!" She reached beneath the bed, fingers brushing against the canvas bag she had hidden weeks ago. Some cash, a few clothes, documents, and a small silver box containing her mother's wedding ring. Her fingers tightened around the keepsake. The door burst open. Deanna lunged for the window just as another shot exploded. Glass shattered around her. Shards sliced her arm, drawing a long crimson line. She didn't stop. She climbed onto the sill, leapt onto the rain-slicked awning, slid down the metal roof, and landed hard in the cold, muddy earth. Pain seared through her body, but survival pushed her back to her feet. Rain began to pour, thin, cold, like invisible ropes lashing her skin. She ran across the open yard, past the silent stables where the horses stirred in the dark. Dogs barked wildly behind her. Lightning flashed. Her father's silhouette swayed in the doorway, gun raised, gleaming white in the stormlight. Deanna threw herself into the old rusted pickup, her mother's truck. The engine sputtered, then roared to life. She slammed the accelerator. Mud flew from the tires. Another gunshot. A bullet slammed into the back of the truck. Deanna gasped, ducked low, hands shaking on the wheel, but she didn't stop. Headlights cut through the rain, golden beams spilling over the winding dirt road ahead. Her heart pounded like war drums, tears mixed with the rain on her cheeks. Ahead was the unknown. Behind her was hell. The night swallowed everything. She drove without stopping. The dashboard clock ticked past midnight. Her hands ached, the dried blood on the steering wheel stuck to her skin. The radio hissed, then crackled to life. Severe weather warning for the northern area. Heavy rain and strong winds expected. Police are searching for an old silver pickup truck connected to a shooting at a private ranch. Deanna's grip tightened. Her throat closed. She switched the radio off, leaving only the sound of the storm and the wipers scraping the glass. Outside, the field stretched endlessly into darkness. No lights, no houses, only rain, only the pounding of her heart. By the time the clock neared 3 a.m., the truck began to jerk. The fuel light blinked red. "No, not now," she whispered, pressing the gas uselessly. The truck shuddered, then died in the middle of the empty road. Rain hammered the roof. Deanna sat still for a moment, chest heaving, before collapsing forward onto the wheel. Outside, darkness pressed close, thick and endless. No cell signal, no hint of light, except the faint yellow glow of the dying headlights cutting into the white curtain of rain. She shivered violently, cold seeping into the wound on her arm. Blood trickled again. She tore a strip from her sleeve and wrapped it tight. Her eyes stung from exhaustion, but she knew sleep meant death. She pushed the door open. Water flooded around her ankles. Wind whipped her hair across her face. The air smelled of wet earth, rust, and freedom. Pulling her coat close, she started walking along the road, praying for a gas station, a porch light, anything. But there was nothing. Only thunder and rain. Her knees buckled. Just as she thought she'd collapse, she saw it. 2 faint lights in the distance, growing brighter. Headlights. Deanna froze, heart hammering. What if it was her father or Harrison's men? The vehicle stopped a few yards away. The door opened. Warm yellow light spilled out, outlining a tall man in a dark jacket and baseball cap. A deep, rough voice rose above the rain. "Hey, are you hurt?" Deanna stood still, rain streaming down her face, fists clenched at her sides. She didn't know whether to run or beg for help. "It's okay," he said, his voice softer now. "You're bleeding." The headlights caught his eyes, gray, steady. Not the eyes of a hunter, but of someone genuinely concerned. For one fragile moment, the instinct that had driven her all night fell silent. In its place came something strange, something warm. Safety. He reached out his hand. Large, calloused, strong, glistening with rain. "Come on, let me help." Deanna stared at that hand, then at the dark road behind her, where danger still lurked like a beast waiting to pounce. She took a breath and placed her hand in his. In that moment, she didn't know that tonight she wasn't just running from the man who wanted to destroy her. She was running toward the one who would save her life. The scent of pine wood and coffee filled the house. Deanna opened her eyes, her head still heavy as if wrapped in fog. Morning light filtered through the linen curtains, casting soft gold patterns on the wooden ceiling. Beneath the thick blanket, she could still hear the faint patter of rain outside, mingled with the distant hum of a truck engine fading away. The room was simple but warm. Pale wooden walls, a small fireplace glowing with embers, an armchair draped in a wool blanket. On the wooden table, a ceramic cup sent up ribbons of steam that smelled of coffee and baked bread. The flickering firelight revealed every worn detail. A black and white photo frame, a cowboy hat hanging quietly, a few books leaning against the window. She stirred slightly. Pain shot through her arm, a white bandage wrapped neatly around her wrist. The door opened softly. The man from last night stepped in, jacket slung over his shoulder, gray eyes under damp hair still touched by rain. He stopped at the doorway, gaze steady but not distant. "You're awake!" His voice was deep, husky, warmer than she remembered. Deanna pushed herself up on one elbow. "Where am I?" "My house." He set the cup on the table. "I saw you collapse by the gate. You were hurt, so I bandaged you. Nothing serious." She looked around, uncertain. "You did that?" "Yeah. And Cookie, the cook here, made you some porridge." He said, "No one stays hungry in this house as long as they're still breathing." A faint smile tugged at the corner of his lips, gone almost as soon as it appeared. Deanna lowered her gaze, her hands trembling slightly. Thank you." Warm silence filled the room. Only the crackle of fire broke it. Rem leaned against the doorframe, gray eyes calm and searching. "Who hurt you?" Deanna froze. The question sliced through the air like a blade. She clutched the blanket tighter, avoiding his gaze. I was in a car accident. The glass shattered. I couldn't move in time." A quiet pause. He didn't press. He only nodded once, his voice low. "An accident, right. Lucky I happened to drive by." He turned toward the kitchen. "Eat something, then rest. You're still weak." A gravelly voice came from behind, making her jump. An old man with silver hair and an apron stood there, wooden ladle in hand, head tilted with half-curious, half-playful eyes. "Well now, did the boss rescue another trouble in a dress?" Deanna's cheeks flushed. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cause trouble." "No trouble at all, sweetheart," he chuckled, placing a steaming bowl of porridge on the table. "Name's Cookie. I cook, watch the horses, and complain all day long. And that tall man over there is Rem Quinn, the kind who can't help saving strangers in a storm." Rem shot him a look, his reply brief. "Cookie, shut up and let her eat." "See?" Cookie shrugged. "Told you. He prefers giving orders to making conversation." He turned away, still laughing. "Eat up, girl. It's safer here than out there." After breakfast, Deanna walked down the narrow hallway, her fingers brushing against the wooden wall. Everything in the house carried his quiet imprint, neat, earthy, deliberate. On the wall hung a few photos, horses in an open field, an old truck, and one faded picture of a younger Rem standing beside a dark-haired woman who was laughing. Deanna touched the frame lightly, a strange ache stirring in her chest. Something about this house made her believe, if only for a moment, that she was allowed to breathe. Afternoon. The rain had stopped. Deanna stepped onto the porch. The sun's warmth spilled over the wooden steps, gold light catching on droplets still clinging to the railings. In the distance, Rem was in the stables. He stood bathed in sunlight, brush in hand, moving slowly and firmly along the chestnut coat of a horse. Dust shimmered around him like tiny flecks of gold suspended in the air. Deanna leaned against the post, watching him. He didn't seem aware of her gaze, or maybe he was, but chose not to show it. There was something about the way he moved, steady, unhurried, self-contained, and beneath it, a quiet loneliness. She didn't understand why she couldn't look away. Maybe because it had been so long since she'd seen a man who didn't want to control, demand, or dictate. Just act and let things be. Cookie walked by, bucket in hand, squinting at her. "You'd better be careful with that look, miss." Deanna startled. What look? The look of someone about to get in trouble with her heart. He chuckled deep in his throat and walked off, his laughter mingling with the breeze. Deanna smiled, her first real smile in months. Something small, fragile, but undeniably alive began to bloom inside her chest. As dusk settled, Rem came up to the porch holding a cup of tea. He set it down on the table, his voice gentle. "It's getting cold. You should stay a few more days. When you're ready to leave, I'll drive you to the main road. The signal's weak here, and nobody asks questions." She stayed quiet, eyes on the fading horizon. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice barely above the wind. "No need for thanks." He turned the cup slowly in his hands. "Just rest." When Rem left the porch, silence returned. Deanna remained there, hands cupping the warm tea, feeling something unfamiliar. Safety, and yet fragility. In her life, she had never known a place so still, where a stranger didn't pry, didn't touch her wounds, only let her sit and breathe. And there, in the last light of the setting sun, Deanna knew, perhaps for the first time in years, she was truly allowed to stay. Morning broke over the ranch with the sound of life. A rooster crowed somewhere far away. Horses snorted in their stalls. The wind whispered through dew-wet fields. The sun hadn't fully risen yet, but a soft gold light had already draped itself over the white fences, illuminating the wide open space. Deanna stepped out onto the porch, a steaming mug of coffee in her hand. The early breeze lifted her hair, carrying the scent of new grass and rain-soaked soil. Out in the distance, Rem was leading a horse out of the barn, tall, steady, and quiet, as if he belonged to the land itself. "Coffee first, breakfast next," Cookie called from the kitchen. "I won't have you working on an empty stomach." Deanna smiled. "Yes, sir, chef." "Stubbornness keeps you alive, girl," he grumbled back, though his tone was warm as morning sunlight. After breakfast, she rolled up her sleeves and followed Rem to the stables. 10 horses, each with its own temperament. Deanna remembered all their names. Ember, Storm, Willow, Dusty. They had started to trust her scent, allowing her to touch their foreheads, check their breathing, take their pulse, and listen to their hearts. She had studied veterinary medicine but had never been able to work where she truly belonged, until now. Rem stood beside her, hands in his pockets, watching quietly. "They like you," he said softly. "They behave better than the students I interned with," she replied, half teasing, half true. He chuckled, a low, brief sound that rippled through the quiet air, like warmth spreading through sunlight. The day passed in small, simple moments that felt oddly healing. Deanna swept the stalls, treated a young horse's wound, and wrote notes in a journal. Rem repaired a broken fence and replaced a horseshoe. Cookie made stew and potatoes for lunch, and the three of them ate on the porch, arguing playfully about who should wash the dishes. "The boss should," Cookie declared, "since the lady cooked for him." Rem tilted his head. "She only did half the cooking. You nearly burned the kitchen doing the other half." "I burned it," Cookie said with mock offense, "because I was cooking for 2 hard-headed fools who don't appreciate culinary art." Deanna laughed, clear and bright, and for a second Rem looked up. Her laughter seemed to clear every shadow that had ever haunted this house. By late afternoon, sunlight poured down like honey. Deanna took Cookie's old camera into the field and photographed Rem as he trained the horses. Light danced across their backs, scattering gold dust each time they galloped. Rem rode Ember, his body and the animal moving as one, hooves striking the earth in rhythmic thunder. When he paused, she lifted the camera and said quietly, "Don't move." The light's perfect. He glanced over his shoulder, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "I don't think I'm much of a picture person." "You don't have to be. The light will do the rest." Click. The shutter captured him, sun-browned face standing between sky and field, gaze distant yet calm, a man carved from stillness and wind. As evening fell, they gathered hay and hauled water for the horses. Deanna perched on the fence, legs swinging as Rem pulled the tarp across the corral. She tossed an apple at him, hitting his shoulder. "Bullseye! Are you challenging me?" "Maybe." He bent down, picked up the apple, and threw it back. She dodged and burst out laughing. Cookie passed by, throwing his hands in the air. "Two grown people acting like children. If I break my back, who's cooking dinner then?" Rem glanced at Deanna, murmuring, "Don't mind him. He says that every day and still outlives the horses." They both laughed. The sound carried over the wide fields and was carried away by the wind. By dusk, the sky turned lavender. They sat on the porch steps, boots dusty, hands wrapped around mugs of hot tea. In the distance, the horses were quiet now, only crickets and wind through the grass. Firelight from the kitchen flickered across her face, bathing her cheeks in amber. "Is it always this peaceful here?" she asked. "No," he said. "Sometimes snow covers the fields. Sometimes storms tear down the fences. Peace isn't out there. It's in here." He tapped his chest. "You sound like a philosopher." "No, just someone who lost peace once and learned how to keep it." The words stilled her. After a pause, she whispered, "I used to think peace meant no one could hurt me, but now, I think it's when someone makes me feel safe." Rem turned toward her. His gaze softened, deep as a lake reflecting sunset. "You can find that here. You don't have to keep running." She smiled, fingers curling around the warm mug. It wasn't a promise. It wasn't a confession. Just a truth, gentle as wind. Friday night. Rain returned, pattering softly on the tin roof. The wind sighed through the cracks in the door. Deanna sat on her bed reading an old book Rem had left on the shelf about wild horses and training methods. She read slowly, trying to keep her mind from wandering. Then she closed it and turned off the light. But when her eyes shut, memory flooded in. Her father, the smell of alcohol, the slam of a gun against the wall. "You made me look like a fool!" The gunshot, the shattering glass. She jolted upright, breath shallow. In that half-dream, half-waking terror, she heard footsteps approaching. "No, please don't." The door creaked open. A tall figure appeared in the dim hallway light. REM. Hey, Deanna." He crossed the room, kneeling beside the bed. His voice was low, steady. "It's just a dream. You're safe here." She blinked, sweat cold on her forehead. The light caught his face clearly. Calm, so real it broke something inside her. I thought—" "I know," he murmured, barely above a whisper. "But you're not there anymore." "He's not here." He handed her a glass of water. His fingers brushed hers, just enough to remind her she was in the present. She drank, breathing slowly. After a moment, her voice trembled, but stayed steady. "You don't even know me." Rem looked up. "I don't need to," he said. "I know fear when I see it." There was no pity in his eyes, only understanding, rare and quiet enough to make her want to cry. He didn't ask why or who. He just stayed, as if his presence alone could anchor her back to earth. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean to wake you." "You didn't," he said, voice low and clipped. "I wake early anyway. And nightmares," he paused. "They're just memories trying to live again." "You've had them too?" He nodded once. "Used to." He didn't say more and she didn't ask. Between them hung a strange silence. Not heavy, but shared, like two people standing on the same edge of something they both understood. "Try to sleep," he said, rising. "It won't follow you forever." "Not if you stop letting it." Before he left the room, he turned back, voice almost a promise. "You're safe here, Deanna. I'll make sure of it. When the door closed, she sat still, listening to the rain outside. In the faint light spilling from the hallway, his shadow lingered on the wall a moment before fading. But his words remained, echoing softly with her now steady heartbeat. She leaned back against the wall and pulled the blanket to her chest. For the first time in years, she believed a man's words. Not because of what he promised, but because of how he said it, as if it were simply the truth. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the window. The smell of fresh baked bread drifted from the kitchen. Cookie's voice grumbled, half scolding, half fond. "You're letting that girl wake up before the coffee's even brewed?" "She wants to work," Rem replied. "Want all you like. She's not working till she eats. I won't have anyone starving under my roof." Deanna smiled. Their voices filtered through the wall like a rhythm of ordinary life, something she hadn't realized she'd missed. She tied her hair back, stepped into the kitchen, and greeted them with a soft, "Good morning." Rem looked at her, quietly, steadily, and in that brief moment, she understood. The fear in him had recognized the fear in her, and both had chosen, at last, to stop running. Morning began as usual. Sunlight spread across the fields, horses brushed against the fence, and the smell of coffee drifted through the wooden house. Cookie was grumbling in the kitchen, Rem was fixing a saddle frame on the porch, and Deanna was flipping pancakes in the pan, humming softly. For a brief, fragile moment, she believed peace could last, until the TV broke it. The newscaster's voice was steady, cold, and distant. "Miller and Associates Bank is offering a $50,000 reward for any information on Deanna Calloway, the missing daughter of ranch owner Jed Calloway. A witness claims to have seen a woman matching her description at a horse ranch near Texas Hill County. Authorities urge residents to come forward." The sound cut through the kitchen like a knife. Deanna froze. The spatula slipped from her hand, oil splattering across the floor. On the screen, her photo appeared. Blonde hair tied loosely, gentle eyes, and a faint, uneasy smile. It was her. Cookie quickly turned off the TV, but it was too late. Deanna's breath came short and shallow, her hands trembling. They know." Rem stood in the doorway, silent for several seconds. The morning light hit his face at an angle, sharp and unnervingly calm. "Deanna," he said quietly, "that woman in the photo, it's you, isn't it?" She didn't answer right away. Her lips trembled. Then finally she nodded. "Yes, I'm not missing. I ran away. My father wanted to force me to marry Harrison Miller. I had no other choice." Rem stepped closer, his gaze steady, not judgmental. "And Miller, the one offering the reward? He's the man my father owes money to. Now he's using that debt to drag me back, like I'm property." In the glow of the kitchen fire, Deanna looked fragile, yet unyielding. Rem nodded slightly, his voice low, controlled. "If they've put a price on your head, people will start looking. Bounty hunters don't care about reasons, only the face." Deanna clutched her arm, eyes wide. "I have to go. I can't let you get involved." Rem shook his head. "You can't keep running like this. Every gas station, every security camera becomes a trap. If you leave here, they'll find you in days." He paused, his voice firm as a wind hitting rock. "You can't stay in this small town. But if you leave, they'll trace you. If you stay, you'll need a legal reason." Deanna looked at him, lost. "A legal reason?" He met her eyes. "A name that gives you protection. A status they can't touch." She gave a bitter laugh. "I have nothing left." Rem was silent for a moment, thinking, then spoke slowly, each word clear. "If you were my wife on paper, nobody could claim you." The kitchen fell utterly silent. Only the clock ticked on the wall. Deanna stared at him, stunned. "What did you just say?" "If you become my wife legally, they can't force you to leave. No police, no Miller, no one. The law would protect you, and I could protect you by right." She stepped back, heart pounding. "You can't do that. You'd be pulled into my mess." "I'm already in it," Rem said quietly but firmly. "The night I saw you standing in the rain at my gate, I knew you were running from something. Now I know what, and I can't just look away." Cookie leaned on the table, his gravelly voice breaking the tension. "He's right, girl. Around here, that marriage license is the only thing strong enough to silence people. I've seen plenty of cases. You should listen. Deanna shook her head, eyes glistening, though she refused to cry. I don't want to turn your life into my chaos. Rem's gaze softened, warm and steady all at once. Maybe I need a little chaos, he murmured. It might make my life mean something again. The air stretched thin, like a string pulled to breaking, then released in a long sigh. Deanna lowered her head. If I say yes, then what? Then from today, he said, his tone firm as an oath, you'll be Deanna Quinn. No obligations, no expectations, just a shield for us both. Cookie chuckled roughly. Fine by me. I'll be the witness, and I'll bake the cake. Not every day I get to attend a wedding in the middle of a storm. Deanna looked at Rem, eyes trembling between fear and something gentler, warmer. Are you sure? Sure, he replied without hesitation. She nodded slowly, like someone who'd been running too long and finally stopped. Then, all right, I agree. Outside the window, the wind began to rise. Far off, the horses neighed sharply, as if sensing the world had just shifted. And in that small wooden house, beneath the soft start of a new reign, Deanna knew this was no longer an escape. It was the beginning of a journey she could never turn back from. The little church nestled quietly in the valley, hidden beneath a canopy of pines. Morning sunlight streamed through old stained glass windows, painting shards of gold and rose across the worn stone floor. There were no bells, no choir, only the rustling wind and the distant whinny of horses from the dirt road outside. Deanna stood at the doorway, her hands trembling slightly. The dress she wore was something Cookie had dug out of an old trunk. Simple cream linen, unadorned, yet when she tried it on, Cookie had said, "You're the most beautiful bride I've ever seen, because you're real." Rem waited at the altar, white shirt, hair neatly combed back, sun-browned skin touched by the soft light filtering through the colored glass. He wasn't a man who stared often, but today his eyes found hers and didn't look away. Sheriff Donovan in his usual uniform stood as the witness. He smiled faintly, admiration flickering behind his easy tone. This might be the quietest wedding I've ever seen, but maybe the truest one too. Cookie sat in the front pew holding a small bouquet of wildflowers he'd gathered himself. His voice rasped with age and affection. No diamond rings, but we've got hot coffee and good hearts. That's plenty enough. Deanna walked slowly down the aisle between two rows of wooden benches. With every step, her heartbeat quickened, not from fear, but from something unnamed and rising. Rem met her eyes and gave a small nod. A hint of a smile touched his lips. Fleeting, but enough to tell her she wasn't alone. When she reached him, Sheriff Donovan opened the ledger. By state law, to recognize a legal marriage, both parties must declare their consent in front of witnesses. No rings required, only truth. Rem turned to face her. Morning light fell across his shoulders, glinting in his gray eyes. Remington Quinn, Donovan read aloud, do you willingly take Miss Deanna Calloway to be your lawfully wedded wife? I do, Rem said, his voice low, steady, without hesitation. And you, Deanna Calloway, do you willingly take Mr. Remington Quinn to be your lawfully wedded husband? Deanna met his gaze, her voice barely above a breath. I do. No one spoke for a moment. There was no music, no applause, only the wild beat of her heart and the calm in his eyes. Donovan nodded, his tone solemn now. By the authority vested in me, I declare you legally married. And as custom allows, the groom may kiss the bride, if both consent. Rem looked at her, his eyes soft as dawn. No promises beyond protection, he murmured, almost like an exhale. Unless you want more, someday. A vow without poetry, yet so real it stung. Deanna couldn't find words. Her body trembled, not in fear, but in the quiet shock of emotion, just as he leaned in. The kiss was gentle, barely a touch, fleeting as breath, more an affirmation than passion. And yet her heart reacted as if the earth itself had shifted. For one suspended moment, the world fell away. She felt the warmth of his breath, the faint scent of wood and leather clinging to his shirt, and something unfamiliar yet profoundly safe. When he pulled back, his eyes lingered on hers, still, quiet, and full of everything he hadn't said. Cookie cleared his throat, breaking the spell. "I told you so." Didn't look symbolic to me. Even Sheriff Donovan chuckled. Classic Rem. Not a man of many words, but when he does something, you believe it. Deanna blushed, smiling despite herself. Rem dipped his head slightly, and for the first time she thought she saw something rare flicker in his expression. Shyness. After the ceremony, they stepped outside. Mountain winds swept through the valley, tossing Deanna's golden hair and filling the air with the scent of pine and wild grass. In her hands was the small bouquet Cookie had given her. Rem brought over a chestnut horse and held out a steady hand for her to mount. "Mrs. Quinn now," he said quietly, his voice carrying something new. "Hope you won't regret it." She met his gaze, sunlight glinting between them. "No, I just need to get used to the sound of it." "You will," he said with a faint smile, helping her onto the saddle. "Everything here takes time." That afternoon, when they returned to the ranch, Cookie had hung a small wooden sign above the kitchen door. Letters hand-painted, uneven but full of heart, "Home of Mr. and Mrs. Quinn." Beside it sat a freshly baked apple pie, golden and fragrant. "Wedding cake," Cookie announced proudly. "Simple, low sugar, easy on the stomach, just like real love." Deanna laughed, tears blurring her vision. She couldn't remember the last time someone had called her by a name that felt like hers. Not someone's daughter, not someone's victim, just Mrs. Quinn. A new name, a beginning. Rem sat on the porch, cup of tea in hand, eyes fixed on the horizon where the sun was sinking into the fields. "Tomorrow will be harder," he said softly. "The news is still out there. Miller won't stop looking, but now you have a place to stand, a name they can't take from you." She walked over and sat beside him, their shoulders brushing. "Thank you," she whispered. "Don't thank me." "Then what should I say?" "Say good evening, husband." She looked up, smiling through the quiet. "Good evening, husband." Rem turned, eyes gentle, a smile that reached all the way to his heart. "Good evening, wife." That night, Deanna lay in her small room, listening to the steady breath of the horses outside. On the table, the marriage certificate lay crisp and new, their signatures side by side in black ink. She touched it lightly, a thin sheet of paper, yet it marked the border between being hunted and being free. She smiled faintly. This marriage had been born from fear, but in the moment his lips touched hers, Deanna knew. That fear had already turned into something else, something tender, a quiet hope. Summer came with golden sunlight and laughter. Their small ranch had never felt more alive. Deanna taught horseback riding to the local kids, brown-haired, chubby-cheeked children who called her Mrs. Quinn with innocent admiration. Every time she heard that name, her heart trembled, first with awkwardness, then with warmth. Rem built another fence behind the yard, while Cookie turned the old barn into a toy shed for the children. Each morning when their laughter filled the air, Deanna felt as though her life was being patched together with little pieces of light. "Look at this," Cookie said, leaning on the doorway with his hands on his hips. "If anyone says this marriage only exists on paper, I'll hit them with a frying pan." Deanna blushed and Rem simply smiled. "Don't hit them, Cookie. Your pan's worth more than my reputation." They laughed together, a sound as light as smoke drifting in the wind. Since the wedding, they had kept to the original agreement: 2 separate rooms, 2 separate rhythms under the same roof. But that boundary had started to blur. In the mornings, Rem left her a cup of coffee on the kitchen table, brewed exactly the way she liked, strong but not bitter. At noon, she tucked a few small pastries into his jacket pocket, for when you forget lunch. At night, they sat on the porch, watching the sunset dye the fields red, silent but at peace. No one mentions the word pretend anymore. No one needed to remind the other that this was a marriage in name only, because every gesture, every breath between them felt too real to be an act. Deanna no longer feared thunder. On rainy days, she still went out to the stables. Thin raincoat clinging to her shoulders, hands gently brushing Storm's mane, talking to the horse like an old friend. Rem stood a few steps away, watching her through the rain, her hair tousled, her smile bright, her eyes alive. He realized the woman who had once trembled in a storm was gone. In her place stood Deanna, strong, free, and full of life. "She makes the horses listen better than I do," Rem joked to Cookie. "Of course she does," Cookie shrugged. "She speaks with her heart. You use your commander's voice." "I just worry she might make my heart listen too," Rem muttered, low enough that Cookie barely heard. That night the storm came hard. Thunder cracked the sky open, and wind howled past the windows. Deanna woke with a start. In the dark, her breathing came fast and broken. The smell of gunpowder, the screams, the shattering glass, all came rushing back like a violent wave. "No, don't come near me!" The door flew open. Rem appeared in the doorway, wearing only a t-shirt and sleep pants, the hallway light casting a shadow of concern across his face. He crossed to her, sat by the bed, and spoke softly. Voice deep, gentle, steady like the rain outside. "Hey, it's me. You're safe, Mrs. Quinn." The words undid her completely. She broke down, sobbing as she clung to him, her body trembling. He wrapped his arms around her, holding her close, letting her rest her head against his chest. There were no boundaries left, no conditions, no roles, only warmth, and the heartbeat of two people who had both lost faith, now finding it again in each other. The rain drummed on the roof, but inside everything was quiet. He said nothing more, just rubbed slow circles along her back until her breathing softened. "I thought I'd gotten over it," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "You don't need to forget," he murmured, his fingers brushing through her hair, so tender it almost made her cry again. "Just remember that the past can't hurt you anymore." She looked up. The space between them was barely a breath. His gaze softened, but deep within it, something else flickered, something they had both been holding back for far too long. Deanna whispered, "If this is a fake marriage, why does it feel so real?" Rem didn't answer. He simply leaned in. The kiss wasn't like the one at the chapel. It was deep, real, full of emotion, like two souls finally finding where they belonged. She kissed him back, fingers threading through his hair, every wall inside her melting like mist in the rain. Outside, the wind quieted. The fire in the hearth glowed softly, casting amber light across their skin. For the first time, Deanna lay in Rem's arms, not as someone being protected, but as someone he had chosen to love. The next morning, sunlight returned. The scent of coffee and pine filled the house again. Rem stood by the counter, brewing coffee, white shirt sleeves rolled up, sunlight glinting off a small scratch on his wrist, the kind left by a rain. Deanna stepped out, wearing his thin sweater, hair still tousled. He looked at her, a faint smile in his eyes. "Sleep well, Mrs. Quinn?" "For the first time in my life," she said. Cookie walked in just then, glancing between them before grumbling, "I just hope this fake marriage doesn't make me bake an early birthday cake." Rem laughed. Deanna blushed, but she didn't look away from him anymore. She knew. No one had to say it aloud, since that night of rain, when pretend had quietly turned into real. Morning dawned clear after the night's rain. Rem said he needed to drive into town for supplies, nails, reins, and veterinary medicine. Deanna went along, simply wanting to breathe something beyond the ranch air after days of routine. The small town looked just as it had the first time she saw it. A row of faded painted storefronts, the smell of fresh pastries drifting from the cafe on the corner, wine chimes tinkling above every door. She wore a wide cotton hat and dark sunglasses, trying not to meet anyone's gaze, though her heartbeat stayed uneasy. As they crossed the street, Rem placed a steadying hand at the small of her back. "It's okay. Everyone here knows me." She nodded, smiling faintly. "I know." They stopped at a cafe near the square. Cookie's favorite, the one he'd once called the strongest espresso within 30 miles. Rem ordered 2 cups. Deanna chose a seat by the window, where sunlight spilled across the table in warm, quiet bands. But the peace shattered like glass at the sound of a deep, familiar voice. Well, look who we have here." Deanna froze. The cup in her hand nearly slipped. She looked up, and the world tilted. Harrison Miller stood before them in a gray suit, a smile cold as steel. Beside him were two tall men in black coats, eyes sharp and predatory. Miller tilted his head, voice smooth as oil. You can't hide forever, sweetheart. Rem rose instantly, moving half a step forward, a silent wall between them. She's not hiding. Really? Miller's smile widened as his gaze fell on the silver ring on Deanna's finger. Playing house, are we? That's cute. Deanna's hands tightened, her lips pressed into a hard line. Rem's palm brushed her back again, a quiet reassurance. His tone stayed calm, but each word carried the kind of weight that thickened the air. She's my wife, and you should walk away now. Miller chuckled. Wife? Come on, Quinn. You think a fake piece of paper can protect her from me? She belongs to... That's enough. Sheriff Donovan's voice cut through the tension from the doorway. He stepped inside, hand resting on the holster at his belt. I suggest you finish your coffee somewhere else, Mr. Miller. Miller's eyes gleamed. Just having a friendly conversation. A conversation that ends now, Donovan said, his tone flat, gaze locked on the two bodyguards. This is my town. You want trouble? You'll get it in cuffs. Silence fell, heavy as thunder clouds. One of the men clenched his fist, but Miller raised a hand, stopping him. Slowly, deliberately, he smirked. You've made quite an impression, Quinn. But you can't keep her forever. Sooner or later, I'll come knocking. And when I do, he leaned slightly forward. Make sure she opens the door herself. Then he turned, walking out. The cafe door swung open, letting in a gust of cold wind mixed with the scent of exhaust and threat. Rem didn't move until Miller's footsteps had faded completely. Donovan glanced at him, voice low. I'll have someone keep watch. But be careful. Miller doesn't let things go easy. Rem nodded. I know. Thanks, Sheriff. Donovan's gaze softened as he looked at Deanna. Stay strong, Mrs. Quinn. Men like him feed on fear. Don't give him what he wants. She managed a small smile. Thank you. When the sheriff left, the cafe sank back into silence. Deanna still couldn't find her voice. Rem placed cash on the table, then gently took her hand. Come on, he said quietly. Let's go home. On the drive back, the wind howled across the plains, carrying red dust and the metallic taste of storm. Deanna stared out the window, her heart pounding beneath layers of dread. Do you think he'll come back? Not think, Rem said, voice low and solid as iron. I know he will. His grip tightened on the wheel, eyes fixed on the endless stretch of road ahead. But this time, if he so much as lays a finger on you... He paused, the gray in his eyes turning sharp as a blade. He'll regret ever coming here. Deanna looked at him, fear and warmth tangling in her chest. Outside, the sky shifted toward a copper red, the color of an approaching storm. But this time she wasn't facing it alone. Evening fell, and the sky darkened as if someone had pulled a curtain across it. Clouds gathered heavy as steel along the horizon. The wind swept over the fields, carrying the smell of rain and damp earth. Deanna was clearing dishes in the kitchen when Cookie came in, his gravelly voice low. Someone's at the gate. She looked out the window. Headlights cut through the dust. An old pickup truck roared up the drive, jerking left and right as if the driver were drunk. Rem moved quickly onto the porch, hand closing around the hunting rifle hanging by the door. Deanna froze, her heartbeat pounding. She didn't need to see clearly. She knew, by instinct, by the deep fear carved into her blood, who it was. Rem, she whispered. It's my father. The truck screeched to a halt on the wet gravel. Headlights flooded the yard, slicing the darkness in half. Jed Calloway stepped out, a broad man with graying hair, his coat streaked with mud, reeking of whiskey. In his hand, a shotgun, the barrel low but trembling. Where is she? His voice was rough, thick with anger and drink. Rem stood still in the open yard, only a few yards away. The wind slammed against the porch roof. The wooden beams groaned, as if the whole house were holding its breath. You should leave, Jed, Rem said slowly, calmly. Tonight isn't the time. Shut up, Jed bellowed. She's my daughter. My blood. No man takes her from me. Deanna appeared on the porch steps. Rem lifted a hand, pushing her gently behind him. Pa, Please. Her voice trembled. I'm not a child you can hit or sell anymore. I left. Please go home. Jed turned, eyes bloodshot, breath thick with liquor. You humiliated me in front of the whole town. You let this man turn the Calloway name into a joke. She has another name now, Rem said, voice low but firm. She's my wife. A lightning bolt split the sky, blinding white for the span of a heartbeat. Wind surged, dust spun through the air. Jed gave a hoarse, broken laugh, madness glinting in his eyes like fire. Wife? You think a piece of paper lets you steal my daughter? I didn't steal her, Rem said, never breaking eye contact with the gun. I saved her. From the hell you built. Silence fell, thick and heavy. Then came the sound of the shotgun being cocked. Click, sharp and cold in the night. Dad, don't, Deanna screamed. Rem didn't move back. He slowly raised one hand, palm open toward Jed, voice even, breath steady. You can shoot me if you want, but if you scare her one more time, you'll live with that guilt for the rest of your life. Rain began to fall, first a few drops, then a downpour. Jed swayed, rain mixing with tears and the streak of blood from a cut on his cheek. I just wanted her home, he muttered. Home? Rem's voice hardened. The house where you turned every laugh into a scream? Where your daughter had to run away in the middle of the night to survive. The words hit like bullets turned inward. Jed staggered. The shotgun slipped from his hands and clattered onto the gravel. A metallic cry lost in the storm. Sirens wailed in the distance. Flashes of red and blue swept across the rain-soaked yard. Sheriff Donovan and two deputies pulled up just as Jed collapsed, shouting hoarsely into the storm. Rem stepped back, letting the rifle fall to the ground. Deanna stood frozen, tears blending with the rain. When Donovan handcuffed Jed, she could only watch, her heart breaking and hollow all at once. He's not a monster, she whispered, just a man who forgot how to love. Donovan nodded, and now he'll have time to learn. Behind bars. The police led Jed away. Engines faded into the rain, leaving the ranch silent again. Only the warm porch light glowing faintly, reflecting on the wet ground like melted gold. Deanna turned to Rem. He stood there drenched, hair plastered to his forehead, gray eyes shining in the dark. She ran to him, threw her arms around him, trembling like someone waking from a final nightmare. You saved me twice, Rem, she whispered against his chest. First from him, then from myself. Rem held her tighter, his forehead resting against her hair, his breath mingling with hers in the soft rhythm of the rain. No, Deanna, he said gently. You saved yourself. I just stood beside you to remind you that you deserve to be free. She looked up. In his eyes, she saw the reflection of the porch light, small, steady, unyielding in the storm. And one more thing, he said quietly. No one, not even the past, is ever taking you from me again. She smiled through her tears and leaned her head on his shoulder. Outside, the rain began to ease. Above them, the clouds tore open to reveal a thin silver streak of light. The storm had passed. For good this time. Morning broke strangely still. After the night storm, the air felt rinsed clean. Mist lay low across the fields. The horses stood quiet in the golden haze. Inside, Deanna packed her old suitcase. Silent, deliberate. The soft rasp of the zipper was the only sound in the room. Each pull cutting through her chest like a blade. She knew that if she stayed, danger would eventually find its way back. Harrison Miller wasn't finished, and her father, even behind bars, was still a shadow that could fall on anyone close to her. Rem didn't deserve that. She placed her mother's silver ring box on the table, fingers tracing the smooth wooden lid. The morning light hit the band inside, glinting like a quiet goodbye. I've brought you enough trouble already, she whispered to no one but the silence. It's time I stopped. The door opened. Rem stood there, shirt dusted from work, his expression calm, as if he'd known this moment was coming. What are you doing? Deanna turned away, unable to meet his eyes. I have to go, Rem. My father might come back. Miller, too, if they hurt you. If you leave, he interrupted, taking a slow step closer, you'll be taking my safety with you. She looked up, startled. Morning sunlight slanted through the window, carving lines of gold and shadow across his face. Soft, steady, unyielding. Rem. No, he said quietly, but his voice carried weight. I used to think I could keep everything outside my heart. That caring would make me weak. But then you came along and I realized, you're what makes me strong. He stopped, only a breath away. If you go, Deanna, don't say it's to protect me. Because you're the reason this place is safe. She gave a broken laugh. You make it sound like I'm something good. You are, he said simply. You're the best thing that's ever happened to me. There was nothing left to hold back, except the truth. Deanna looked at him, and in his eyes she saw both the storm that had passed and the calm that followed. She stepped forward, hands trembling slightly, and rested them against his chest. Rem, she whispered, if I stay, I won't be your burden anymore. You never were. Then don't go, she said softly but clearly. Stay, not as my protector, but as my partner. Then she rose onto her toes and kissed him. The kiss wasn't an agreement or gratitude. It was acceptance. Simple, bare, with nothing left between two wounded souls but truth. Rem pulled her closer, answering her kiss as if he'd waited his whole life for it. Outside, the breeze carried the scent of new grass through the open window. Horses snorted softly in the paddock. Sunlight scattered across the wooden floor like shards of warm gold. When they finally broke apart, Deanna laughed through her tears. I used to think our marriage was just paper. And now it's the realest thing I've ever known. They stepped out onto the porch. The sky stretched wide and blue, the last drops of rain on the fence glinting like silver threads. Rem took her hand, his voice low and sure, words etched into the quiet morning air. Whatever comes, your father, Miller, the whole damn world, we face it together. Together, she echoed, fingers tightening around his. She lifted her gaze to the sky, clear now, washed of every trace of the night before. On the porch steps, Cookie watched them from afar, a satisfied grin tugging at his mouth. Told you, he muttered. Storms are just tests for the heart. That afternoon, Deanna led the horse out to the open field. Rem walked beside her, silent, his hand never leaving hers as the wind swept across the grass. They stopped in the middle of the vast plain, where the sky seemed to meet the earth. We could start over, she said, build something new, somewhere no one can find us. No need for somewhere else, Rem replied, glancing back toward the ranch. Freedom isn't running. It's standing your ground and not being afraid anymore. Deanna nodded, her eyes glistening in the sunlight. Then I'll stay, and I'll learn not to be afraid. With you. Rem leaned down, pressing a kiss to her forehead. That's our real vow, isn't it? Yes, she whispered, smiling through the tears. No priest, no paper. Just us. Beyond the horizon, the sun was setting, turning the ranch gold. The scent of freshly cut grass drifted in the wind, mingling with the soft, distant sounds of the horses. In that glow of fading light, two silhouettes stood hand in hand. No vows spoken, none needed. Their hearts had already made them. 2 years later, morning rose softly over the fields, light as mist. On the wooden sign by the gate, the hand-carved letters had faded, yet still stood proud. Quinn Ranch, Wild Horse Sanctuary, once a refuge, now a place of renewal. The wild horses that once trembled under the whip now ran freely under the sun. Deanna, now the lead veterinarian, wore a white lab coat and gloves. The old scar on her wrist had nearly disappeared. Rem managed the new stables, while Cookie ran the kitchen, still grumbling every morning. I thought peace meant not hearing anyone scream, Cookie muttered. Now it's horses, kids, adoption visitors. Paradise sure makes a lot of noise. Paradise that's noisy feels more alive, Rem said, pouring him coffee. Deanna watched them and smiled. They had turned a forgotten piece of land into a home built on kindness. She'd opened a small veterinary clinic in town, a place where people brought not only wounded animals, but also their own quiet pain. One day a young woman came in, bruises circling her wrist, carrying a stray cat. Deanna gently wrapped the cat's paw, then smiled softly. You can leave it here if you're scared. Why are you helping me? The girl asked, her voice trembling. Because I used to be one of them, Deanna said softly. I once thought I didn't deserve to be saved. But all it takes is one person who believes, and that's enough to keep living. The girl broke down crying. Deanna pulled her close, heart light as an early spring morning. That afternoon, the mailman brought a letter from her hometown. The envelope was yellowed, stamped with the seal of the state where she was born. Just a few lines: Jed Calloway, deceased, found at his property, alcohol poisoning, buried on family land. She froze, unable to breathe. Rem placed a steady hand on her shoulder. We can go, he said quietly, if you want to. 2 days later, the pickup truck rolled along the same dirt road she had fled down 2 years ago. The sky was pale gray, the wind carrying the scent of dust and memory. Rem drove with one hand on the wheel, the other holding hers. Neither spoke. They didn't need to. The old house appeared at the end of the road. Broken porch, fallen fence, the window she once climbed through still cracked. No one lived there now. Only the wind whispered through its hollow frame. Deanna stepped out of the truck, holding a small bouquet of wildflowers. Grass had overgrown the yard, and in the corner stood a rough wooden marker, carved by hand. Jed Calloway. No one tended it, only the earth and the wind. Deanna knelt, laying the flowers on the grave. Rem stood silently behind her, giving her the space she needed. Pa, she whispered, I used to be terrified of coming back here. I hated you so much I thought I'd hate you forever. But today, I realize I don't have to hate anymore, because I'm still alive, and I've lived well. She lifted her face and her eyes clear as a lake after rain. I forgive you, because I survived you. A gentle breeze passed, carrying the scent of dry grass and the warmth of the setting sun. A reply without words. Rem stepped forward, resting a hand on her shoulder. He can't hurt you anymore. I know, she said with a calm smile, and I don't need him to apologize anymore. She stood looking at the house one last time, a place that had once been her nightmare, now nothing more than a healed scar. Let's go home, she said. Rem nodded. Home. On the drive back, sunset poured over the fields. Wild horses ran alongside the truck, their manes glowing orange in the fading light. Deanna leaned her head against Rem's shoulder, eyes closed. I used to think freedom meant running away. And now? He asked, squeezing the wheel gently. Now I know freedom is having the courage to look the past in the eye and still smile. He smiled and kissed her forehead. That's my girl. That night when they returned to the ranch, Cookie had already lit the kitchen lamps. 2 glasses of apple cider sat waiting on the table. I don't know what happened, Cookie grumbled, but judging by your faces, it's finally over, isn't it? Rem and Deanna smiled. She lifted her glass, gazing out over the moonlit fields. To peace, Rem said. To freedom, she replied. Their glasses touched softly, the sound fading into the quiet night. The next morning, Deanna stepped out onto the porch. The sun rose over the hill, painting the stables in gold. A newly rescued wild horse stood by the fence, watching her with wary, trusting eyes. She approached slowly, stroking its mane. Welcome home, she whispered. Rem appeared behind her, his arms encircling her waist. Home, he said, where both of us found ourselves again. She leaned into him as the wind moved through her hair, and the morning light wrapped around them like a warm blanket. Dawn rose gently over the quiet countryside. The first light of day spilled slowly across the golden fields, dew still clinging to each tender blade, glimmering like strands of silk. Far off, the horses grazed through the mist, their breath mingling with the scent of damp earth, the fragrance of a morning that belonged entirely to peace. Rem was out in the yard, boots dusted, sleeves rolled to his elbows. On the back of a small chestnut pony sat Eli, their 3-year-old son, sitting straight and proud, tiny hands clutching the reins. Easy, kiddo. Don't pull too hard, Rem said, voice calm but firm. I'm trying, Daddy. Eli laughed. That bright, wind-like laughter that only children have. For a moment, time itself seemed to hold its breath. The sun broke fully over the horizon, pouring gold over father and son. Rem kept a light hand on the reins, letting the boy guide, careful but trusting. From the porch, Deanna watched. She wore a soft white dress, her hair loosely tied, one hand resting on the gentle curve of her belly, where their second child stirred quietly. Every morning she woke early to make Rem's coffee, then came out to watch him teach their son to ride. There was no trace of fear left in her eyes now, only a calm light and the quiet joy of belonging. "You're doing great, champ," she called, her laughter carried away by the wind. Eli turned and waved. "Look, Mommy, I'm riding just like Daddy," Rem smiled, lifting the boy down and tossing him playfully into the air. Eli squealed, wrapping his arms around his father's neck. Deanna stood watching, her heart melting at the sight. The man who once walked out of the ruins of fear was now holding her entire future in his arms. When Eli ran inside with Cookie, who now claimed the boy as his honorary grandson, Rem walked over to the porch. He leaned against the doorframe, eyes tracing the horizon. "That kid might end up more stubborn than me," he said. Deanna laughed softly, gaze following the pony disappearing behind the fence. "And I think he has your heart. I just hope he learns one thing." "What's that?" "That freedom isn't about running away. It's about knowing where you belong." She turned to him, her eyes bright in the soft morning sun. "You became my freedom, Rem." He looked at her, resting his hand gently on her belly, over the small life growing inside. "And you," he said quietly, "mine." They stood there together, fingers intertwined, watching the sun rise higher. Golden light swept across the field, over the fence, the roof, their sleeves, chasing away every shadow that had ever haunted them. In the distance, Eli darted back into the yard, laughing as a few horses galloped past him. His laughter mingled with the wind, with the rhythm of hooves, with the steady, peaceful heartbeat of two people who had traded their past for this present moment. Deanna rested her head against Rem's shoulder. "I used to think freedom meant running," she murmured. "But now you know," Rem replied softly. "Freedom is the moment you stop running and realize you're home." She smiled. The wind carried their laughter, the scent of coffee, and the first warm rays of the day. By the time the sun climbed higher, the whole field glowed. The horses tossed their manes, light flashing off their strong bodies. Rem squeezed Deanna's hand gently. She looked up at him, brown eyes gleaming, bright and alive like the dawn itself. "You became my home," she thought, "and I, yours." They stood side by side, their shadows stretching long over the golden grass, merging with the widening light of morning. Behind them, the little house stood with its doors open, chimney smoke curling softly into the sky, and the sound of a child's laughter echoing within. Freedom was no longer a dream. It was here in every breath, every glance, every sunrise.